Hey, Miguel Iturrate back here on the CRP, and I'm joined by Devin Miller, my sidekick in the MMA world, and we're going to go over the UFC on ESPN 10 card, on ESPN Plus 10, rather, and that comes to us May 18th out of Rochester, New York. The main event, Rafael dos Anjos taking on Kevin Lee. It's a welterweight fight, and Devin, you looking forward to this Rochester event? That's a little closer to home, no?
Yeah, about 7 or 8 hours away from where I'm at in Indiana. But yeah, that's a pretty big, significant fight. You got two former lightweights going against each other. Kevin Lee making his welterweight debut. A lot of people believe he should have made the move a lot longer ago. He's struggled to make it down to 55 for some time now. He's been clamoring for a 165-pound division. I think that'd be a good division for both these guys. And Kevin Lee's actually out on record coming out, bringing it up that he wants RDA and him to both weigh in at 165, almost as a protest to create that division. But RDA, we've seen him have some success since moving up. He goes up to welterweight, ends up getting a top 5 ranking, defeating guys like Malignaggi and won a decision over Robbie Lawler. Recently had a couple setbacks though over with two of the top 3 contenders in Colby Covington and now current champion Kamaru Usman. Kevin Lee coming off a hard loss to Ally Aquina, moving up in weight, trying to reignite his career. He's still a very young guy, has a lot of upside, very charismatic, good on camera, just not really pulling together the wins that he needs to really become a true big star. So maybe this will be a good move for him. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the fight because it does hash some things out. With Lee formally moving up to the welterweight division, I think it puts to bed, missed weight classes and stuff like that. Rafael dos Anjos, he'd made the change a little while back, so you are talking about smaller guys here, but I'm not a fan of the whole talk of the new weight classes and stuff like that. I think, when you have a new batch of fighters, there may be, some other tailoring that could be done for some other guys and some other weight classes and stuff. You can never get it right for everybody. So you might as well just stick with the consistency of what you had. That's just my opinion. But, we got a good card here. And, next on the agenda, what do we have?
Well, we got the co-main event's kind of been switched up here as of just this week with Neil Magny being pulled, and he comes out and just says that it was a USADA violation. He was scheduled to fight Vicente Luque. Now Vicente Luque will be fighting on short notice Derek Krantz, a LFA standout, making his UFC debut. Vicente Luque, a ranked top 15 welterweight, been on a good run, is very, very talented. Just had arguably the fight of the year with Brian Barberina just back in, I believe, February. And then you also got a middleweight contender in Antonio Carlos Jr., a guy that a lot of people are really overlooking, don't know much about. He's on a good win streak. Very talented guy. You've got the winningest, most submission wins in the UFC history fighter, Charles Oliveira, coming back for his 3rd fight with Nick Lentz on this card. And I think a very good women's bantamweight bout between Aspen Ladd, who I think is a potential championship contender in the future, against Sijara Eubanks. So there's some solid fights and some potential contenders on this card.
Yeah, I do think it should be an exciting card for Rochester, and the UFC ESPN Plus app delivering it. RDA and Kevin Lee, the main event of 5 rounds. The main card that you just mentioned, good stuff on there. And you're right, I'm a fan of the Bronx there. I like Oliveira. We'll see how the Nick Lentz trilogy closes out there. But other than that, the UFC's been making some big announcements, and some of them have been some big surprises in my book. Number one on the most recent announcement list is the Nate Diaz versus Anthony Pettis bout announced at welterweight. And that's set for UFC 241. let's cover that one first, and then we'll go back and go through the undercard of RDA and Lee.
Well, when it comes to Nate Diaz and Anthony Pettis, this has been a rivalry that's been brewing for several years. These guys don't like each other. Anthony Pettis made that very clear on Helwani's show earlier this week. Really coming into this fight with a lot more animosity than what he normally does. And it really dates back to Anthony Pettis' title defense against Gilbert Melendez, who is Nate Diaz's training partner over there in Stockton. And Pettis won that fight, and we all know the Diaz brothers have a history of having a lot of backstage antics, and they're no strangers to taunting people and even having in-cage altercations, outside the cage altercations. Well, apparently there was some words that were exchanged between Anthony and Nate back then, and they talked about fighting each other. I've seen Nate Diaz that he's kind of trolled Anthony Pettis on Twitter for some years. One of the interesting things about this fight right now is that this fight's going to be at 170 pounds. Just like what we were just talking about with RDA and Kevin Lee, these are two other guys who most of their career has been fought at 155 pounds. Now this will be fought at 170. Nate Diaz does have a history at 170 pounds. Anthony Pettis has only had one fight at 170 pounds, and it was his most recent fight when he goes up in weight and pulls off a very surprising knockout of Wonderboy Thompson, maybe the upset of the year at this point, gets himself in the rankings at welterweight, and now Nate Diaz is coming out of retirement. This will be the co-main event. Apparently, this was in the contract. Anthony said. As the co-main event to the big UFC heavyweight title fight in August in Anaheim between Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. So I think this is a perfect fight for that undercard. It'll garner a lot of attention. These are two marketable names. You got Anthony Pettis, who, people remember the kick off the cage, the Showtime kick, the Wheaties box. He was groomed to be a big star. Didn't really manifest because he took a lot of losses since he lost the belt to Rafael dos Anjos back in 2015. Had really an up and down career since then, but he's still relevant, still pulled together some big wins. And Nate Diaz really has been a big name for some time, but never bigger than he has been now since his two fights with Conor McGregor. So this is the perfect time to match these two together. I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. And I think it's a good compliment to already a great card that they already got going on over there in Anaheim.
I agree with you, and it is a compelling fight. It's a fight that, I think it'll be close when it opens at the books. It's hard to pick a winner. Both guys, I guess we can label them inconsistent. Diaz maybe by choice. Pettis, as well as a couple of losses, also had some injuries he's worked through. And if I'm not mistaken, he had an ill-advised drop to 145. Now at 170, he's behaving a lot better in the ring kind of thing. So, it'll be an interesting fight, and it tells a lot. One of the things I think that's interesting is with Nate Diaz going by the wayside, you can check off another one of the potential Conor McGregor opponents. So Conor's getting to be the odd man out in his weight class.
Yeah, it seems like every conversation ends up back at Conor because there's been just so many talks about what's going to happen with him, and he still is the UFC's biggest star, and there's been a lot of conversation about who he would fight, but really the only one left, as you just mentioned, really would be Justin Gaethje, because the other just would be a big curveball option would be Max Holloway, and I think that was a very unlikely to happen in the first place, and especially coming off the loss of Dustin Poirier, and he's been just scheduled for a new bout. So if Conor McGregor's going to fight anytime soon, it'll probably be against Justin Gaethje. I don't really see who's left because everybody's booked.
Yeah, it got interesting. The Nate Diaz trilogy obviously was one of the strong possibilities there. Now Diaz electing to fight at 170. Conor probably preferring to stay away from 170 for now. Their first fight, I believe, was at that weight class, and it's not that compelling. I mean, there has been a call for that third bout to happen, but it just seems like the parties have never really just sat down and tried to hammer it out here. And again, the UFC here opts to go in a different direction. So we'll see. We'll see. This may actually be, I mean, the bottom line is if Conor wants to sit or he wants to wait or he wants to do whatever he wants, then the Nate Diaz versus Anthony Pettis fight might be a tryout fight to fight Conor down the line.
Yeah, it's possible. Anthony Pettis made a comment that he was offered to fight. That was brought up at least was a fight with Conor McGregor. That would have been definitely unexpected, but I don't know. I don't know. I'm so tired of the Conor McGregor thing because I don't. It's always so speculative. We don't know. He could get. I mean, we've heard rape charges. He's attacked people for taking pictures with him with his cell phone. He's getting in fights in nightclubs. I don't even know at this point. Like he's such a circus that it's becoming to the point where I don't even care anymore. He needs to get a fight, or just I wish he would just stay out of the headlines, go sell whiskey, and just disappear for all I care at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. I've had a tendency to lean that way for the whole circus and the whole Conor McGregor show, but some of the signs, these may be signs that the UFC is heading in that direction as well, and maybe he's getting back to being treated like another regular member of the roster. Now, the UFC came up with a real, you mentioned Max Holloway. Max Holloway's booked. He's UFC 240's main event against Frankie Edgar, and we had speculated that the UFC might pass Edgar over here because, the fact is Edgar's a little bit longer in the tooth, and there were some compelling matchups for Holloway among the younger guys in the weight class. And on top of that, you have Holloway maybe coming back to 145. Was that up in the air? But it looks like Max is going to defend his belt against Edgar at UFC 240, and that's exciting.
Yeah, I do kind of agree with Alexander Volkanovski, who was on Helwani's show earlier this week. He was out there making his stake that he definitely has earned the title fight, which I don't think anybody really disputes after his win over Aldo. But there's been this talk about Frankie Edgar, and he made a comment that if they book Frankie and Max, it's going to be almost like a thing out of sympathy. And I do kind of agree with that. And I think this is just kind of rewarding Frankie for being a company man. He's got a big name behind him. Max needs an opponent. Max is coming off a hard loss up at 55 to Dustin Poirier. This fight was booked on two other occasions. Max got hurt at one point, and the fight with Frankie was delayed. Frankie actually took a gamble and did the company a favor and fought Brian Ortega while Max was healing up, and it turned out to bite him. Frankie Edgar gets stopped for the first time in his career, first round knockout at the hands of Brian Ortega, which is what won Brian Ortega a title fight. So this is really the UFC just giving back to Frankie for taking that risk in the first place. I think that Max will be a significant favorite in this fight. Frankie's 37 years old at this point, but Frankie Edgar is one of the true legends of the sport, been around for a long time. This is a guy that probably could have been fighting at 135 pounds for the most of his career, was a 155-pound champion, has been a 145 contender for some years now. If it weren't for Jose Aldo, would have probably been the 45 champion years ago. Very consistent. So he's a great fighter, and I have nothing but respect for Frankie Edgar. He's been in some wars. He's always been a game opponent. So I have nothing wrong with this fight, especially since they're going to do this pretty quick. It's going to be the end of July. I think that gives time for Volkanovski to kind of sit on the sidelines, take some time off, and fight the winner of this. And I think that's probably what's in the plans for the UFC, which tells me the Max is going to probably settle down at 145 for a little bit longer.
Yep, I agree. I think you go back even further with Frankie Edgar when he made the move from 155 to 145. It was into Conor McGregor's world, and there were several fights and several times where Edgar was the logical guy for the next title shot, and he got passed over for McGregor because of the Bucks, basically. And so I think if you're going to reward a guy, he might be the guy that deserves a reward because that's company man type of stuff that you were talking about. That's he's been doing that type of things. Letting guys go ahead of him and stuff for a little while, helping the UFC out, so to speak. So I have no problem with the shot. I do agree with you. Holloway's going to be a tall order for Frankie at this point in his career. Hopefully, Frankie, maybe comes up with some type of game plan or something. But I don't know. I don't know if a boxing heavy game plan is going to be something that works unless he lands against a guy who's so diverse in his striking as Holloway. So we'll see. It's a tough fight for Edgar, but glad to see him back. As for Volkanovski, Jose Aldo fighting at home, you got to get credit for the win. There's no problem with that. But I can't get the thought out of my head that Aldo, bought the Ferrari in and got it up to about 40 miles an hour, and that's it. He didn't and stuff. So Aldo now means an instant title shot off of that flat performance. So Volkanovski, maybe he should fight one of the other top contenders in a real true number one fight and get the winner. So I don't know. I don't have any problem with Edgar stepping ahead of some of the younger guys. They can wait.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about Volkanovski, though, I mean, he is undefeated in the UFC. I think he's 7-0 now, and he did just beat, without a doubt, the number one contender in the division. So, I mean, I do think that, and on top of that, there's really nobody else around at this moment unless Zabit goes in and beats Ortega, with Ortega just coming out off such a just brutal loss to Holloway. So, Frankie and Volkanovski are really the only options for Holloway at this point. Frankie, I think, is ready, he's fresh at this time. The only thing that could concern me a little bit is, man, Max did take a lot of damage in that fight with Dustin Poirier, and I don't know if that's going to play a factor. And I don't know if we've seen him fight somebody that is quite as fast and mixes it up quite as well as Frankie Edgar does. Frankie's a very good wrestler. He's got good boxing. He's got a lot of experience, so he could be a live dog, and he could potentially shock the world here. I think, as you mentioned, it's going to be a tall order, but especially if Max Holloway is fighting up to his capability, I think it'll be a really tough matchup for him. But I expect them to probably have Ortega and Zabit on the same card, and maybe another good co-main event spot behind this to really sell this card. So I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a decent fight.
Now, speaking of fights that are happening for the money, let's go over to the bare knuckle boxing world, because we've got Paulie Malignaggi and this Artem Lobov. The talk was earlier, when Lobov fought on the last BK card, there was talk that June 22nd would see him fight Paulie Malignaggi, and it looks like that's a done deal for June. So we're going to get Paulie versus Artem Lobov in the bare knuckle world, and Paulie hopes McGregor's watching.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that, and I think that's wishful thinking on the part of Paulie Malignaggi that he's going to somehow pull Conor McGregor into the bare knuckle boxing world. I just don't think the UFC will let that happen while he's under contract, and they can't even get Conor into the UFC cage where it'd be significantly more lucrative for him against some of these guys than it would be anything that he could be doing in bare knuckle boxing. So I think that's wishful thinking on Paulie's part. And we were just talking about damage done to Max Holloway in his last fight with Dustin Poirier. This bare knuckle boxing, craze that's going on right now, man. I mean, you want to talk about some significant damage? Look at the aftermath photos of Artem Lobov and Jason Knight. Now he's fighting 3 months later against a world champion boxer. There's really just no. I don't see any sense in it, really. I don't know who's managing Artem Lobov. I mean, I know that he's getting more attention than he's ever gotten in history. If it wasn't for this, he would just be another in the long line of UFC rejects who just got cut from the promotion and really never heard again in the mainstream. So this is keeping him relevant more than it's ever been. but I would like to know how much. I need to look that up about how much he's really getting paid to do this, because the amount of damage he's taking is just staggering, and I just can't picture these guys having long careers in those type of bouts, and I don't see where he's gonna beat Paulie Malignaggi in this fight either, going in boxing, even if it's bare knuckle against a world champion boxer.
Well, I mean, Paulie was never known as a huge puncher, but having no gloves will make a difference in terms of damage, in terms of whether you can score a knockout, things like that, and also whether you can damage your hand. So we'll see how it goes for him. Paulie's on record as saying that he's getting well compensated, and he's making more than frontline UFC guys and that sort of stuff. I don't know if that's all 100% true, but that is what Paulie had said. So and it would have to be something like that for a guy like Malignaggi to try this. Malignaggi, he's a showman too, you know what I mean? So he's putting a lot into the, making sure that the video went viral where he pushed Artem Lobov in the gym and all that nonsense and stuff like that. It's surprising to see because Paulie is an announcer, and Paulie, even as a boxer and stuff, I mean, Paulie trash talk. I remember around the Adrian Broner fight, there was a lot of trash talk and stuff like that, but that was more Broner, Towards the end of his career, Malignaggi's been, respectful of his opponents in England and that sort of stuff and things. So this kind of reversal thing, there's got to be money we're not seeing. That's what I guess. There's got to be like some type of payday or some type of ability to pay someone like Malignaggi to do this that gets his attention, because I just don't see. The fight that Lobov had before. It was a good fight, but time and place. I don't see the Stephan Bonner, Forrest Griffin type of reaction where all of a sudden nobody can stop talking about bare knuckle boxing because of the Artem Lobov Easter fight. You know what I mean? So is this Paulie Malignaggi fight now going to be that crossover fight that everybody can't get enough of the sport? Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think you're right. I think the fact is we're recycling here. We're reinventing the wheel. There's a reason why the UFC started out that way. There were no gloves. There were no nothing. The UFC started out that way. There's a reason why eventually they said, shit, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's put it in rounds. Let's get gloves going. This, that, and this stuff. When you get a guy with 75 stitches, you're all going to rethink, the bare knuckle thing. And, if it goes badly, it's funny because part of what the bare knuckle thing brings and what, UFC brings, or from the early days of UFC, seeing live UFCs, especially the early, more raw UFCs, it's an adrenaline rush. It's a rush to be at the live event as well. Even the pay-per-views and stuff, but the live events, there really is a rush. And I think bare knuckle boxing is going to have that, the sound of this, the punch is different, things like that. There is going to be that initial like, whoa, that was wow, But I don't think it's sustainable because, like I said, I think you're also talking about a little bit of fighting in this type of sport, and I think that makes a difference. I think once you get to be elite at a athletic pursuit, athleticism obviously is an athletic pursuit. Right? Athleticism plays a big deal in it. It makes a big difference. And the elite guys are a package of technique and athletes and, the whole package, right? So I think, you're not going to attract the frontline top of the name guys. With all due respect to Paulie, he is no longer that in boxing, He's not even an active world champion. He's years removed from his world title reigns. So it basically is a retired boxer. It's basically the bare knuckle boxing thing for boxing is basically almost like Bellator to the UFC. Paulie couldn't, got the itch. They threw some money at him, and there he is trying this bare knuckle boxing thing. But I don't see us talking about bare knuckle boxing in 5 years. Maybe maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully for the athletes and everybody's making money, let them do it. But I just don't see it.
Yeah, neither do I. I see this as more of a, for casual fans, they're not going to really know who Artem Lobov is, and a lot of them won't even know who Paulie Malignaggi is. and they're going to see bare knuckle boxing as more of a freak show than anything. And for the people in the know, they're going to look at this and just like the way I do, and they're going to see a UFC, a middle of the road, unranked, average UFC fighter, and a older, past his prime, former world champion boxer who's just trying to keep himself relevant, going over and
Or,
doing like
or
doing
a
almost like
commentator making a comeback.
yeah, doing almost like a publicity stunt over there in bare knuckle boxing. So it's not a good look for either one of them, I don't think. And I definitely think that Paulie Malignaggi is a big favorite to win that fight.
Yeah, we'll see what the odds do with it, and it should be, something. I think the thing is it's going to get a lot of attention, right? But what makes it fascinating to me is, again, you just talked about UFC 240, and we're going to have this, that, and the other thing. And then UFC 241, the big heavyweight match, and this, that. They started to announce their calendar through the end of the year. They already know where they're going to be fighting in December and things like that. It's like, after Paulie, Artem, Lobov, what do we do for an encore here?
Yeah, I don't know.
So, there really doesn't seem to be a plan except to exploit this for as much as it's worth and then kind of see what you got, So, and I just don't know if that's the right approach. And like you questioned, I don't know if they got the right two names, not to cross over and get people's attention. And then when you got guys covered in blood and stuff like that, you're going to turn off. Guys can't watch that with their families.
No, and I don't think they're going to be able to get any serious relevant fighters to really sign to do that at this point. So
yeah,
I think that you're going to have some more any of these type of big events. It's going to be stuff like this. I don't think they're going to be able to get somebody like Conor McGregor by any means up in there to do something like this. I don't think that the stage is big enough for that, or the style of combat. I think it's sustainable for a long career. So I think a lot of them are going to be hesitant to actually do that. I think you're going to have more guys who aren't going to make it in pro boxing, aren't going to make it in mixed martial arts, who are going to throw their hat in this as an alternative to be relevant. And I think it's going to be on the fringe of combat sports, but that's maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe it'll blow up.
Yeah, no, I'm we've had certain guys from MMA and stuff more than boxers. I think you can find some boxers. I think Brandon Rios, guys like that would probably think about it and do it if the money was right, But these guys are guys that, even Malignaggi, he's put so much into his craft, to throw it out the window because you can't box a bare knuckle boxing match like you do a pure, Queensberry rules boxing match. It's just not the same thing. There's a little bit of a difference. You're going to be more flat-footed, throwing bigger punches, I think, just for one thing. Paulie on his bike and stuff like that, and in and out and stuff, there all of a sudden it's like, just the concept of a boring bare knuckle boxing match, and they could be very boring because at the point of, you get the idea that maybe the technique's a little lesser, right? So you're not going to be that impressed with the technique and stuff. It's more of a fight, right? That's kind of what the selling point is, right? But it's like at the end you're watching bad boxing.
Yeah, the most impressive thing that I got from the little bit I've seen of bare knuckle FC so far is just the amount of just brutality that the human anatomy can take. That is kind of mesmerizing, especially watching that Lobov Jason Knight fight. Just watching them just pound each other's face in is pretty. It's like watching you see a brutal car crash on the road or something, and it's something terrible, but you don't really want to look away. It's kind of captivating. Or watching some kind of nature show and watching wildlife devour one another. It's ugly and it's obscene, but you can't take your eyes off of it. That's kind of the way I looked at it. Like I didn't really see it as aesthetically beautiful, like I do something like Gastelum and Adesanya, or some great, beautiful boxing match. Or watching like something like Lomachenko fight. When I see that, I see not only are you technically watching violence, you're watching a fight, you're watching combat, but you're seeing something beautiful. It's aesthetically beautiful in the sport. I don't get that vibe with bare knuckle FC. I just feel like it's just carnage, but it's I don't know. Maybe we'll grow to appreciate. I think people saw MMA the same way in the early days. So maybe
Well, it took MMA switching a lot of rules and adding a lot. The MMA sport is not the same now. Start, and it's been a big evolution, and that evolution is what I think is kind of being ignored here. They put gloves on in MMA in the early going because they did fight with no gloves, and it's just protect the head, protect the hand a little bit, and it makes a difference. Groin shots, hair pulling. There are reasons why. Bare knuckle doesn't have any of that, obviously. Bare knuckle is Queensberry rules, but with no gloves, right? So they take out some of the extreme, but one of those extreme things was the bare knuckle thing and using that. So, I think we'll learn a lesson again. It may come in this next fight if I wonder what it'll take to actually have to stop one of these things because of cuts. Because nowadays you sometimes get cuts that maybe they can keep going, but they stop it. And here it seems maybe they're going to go the other way where they're going to let it go a little bit longer. And, like I said, none of that looks good. I mean, you can't you got, guys hanging out watching fights and stuff. That's cool. But when it breaks down into like, are you going to get the pay-per-view this weekend to watch with your 15-year-old and your old lady? If the guys are going to be covered in blood and stuff like that, then maybe you're not going to do that. I don't think the casual fan gets that, interested in the blood sport aspect of it. That's the part that's a turnoff.
Yeah, I think just the name value. I don't think people know who these people are too. I think that there's this sense of that they're on the fringe and that they're not. They don't have the promotion behind them that boxing and UFC does. So I think that turns a lot of people off too. Is they sense that it's just it's almost just like bar brawls or something. And that there's not really, we're not watching the high level combat athletes in there compete with each other. We're watching just two people beat the hell out of each other. And when you take the sporting aspect out of it, I think it turns off a lot of casual people.
Yep. And, we'll see. That's June 22nd, and we'll get more of that. Not to beat a dead horse, but Conor is kind of just sitting around, not, being that pervasive on his social media or anything like that. So he's up in the air now. And we just talked about two potential opponents for him. One being, Nate Diaz and the other one being Max Holloway. Check. They're both gone. So it does narrow it back down to Justin Gaethje, as you pointed out. But what do you think of the possibility of Conor coming to the UFC and asking for permission to do another one-off?
I think anything's possible, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's anywhere close to what the Mayweather fight was. And I think that they knew that there was so much to gain with that type of a PR stunt with the Mayweather fight. I don't think that Paulie. I think there's a lot of people that if I just question just average UFC fans that wouldn't even really know who Paulie Malignaggi is. So, but they all know who Floyd Mayweather is. So I think that that's going to be a big issue. Like I don't see them getting 4 million pay-per-view buys out of a one-off with Paulie and bare knuckle boxing. The only thing that could actually be somewhat lucrative for them is the whole bare knuckle thing. Like that's one thing where it would be kind of interesting to see how that would be sold to the public, because I think a lot of people would be interested in the whole bare knuckle thing with Conor McGregor. But
yeah, it might be special or something. The UFC would actually almost have to, like, I could see DAZN throwing a ton of money on it, thinking they'll get a lot of subscribers, but that would mean that the UFC would have to explain to ESPN how they're letting their number one asset go to the zone. So, that's not going to happen. But, yeah, I think the deal is probably too complicated at this point without the presence of Mayweather, who's to guide somebody through a deal like that. You got McGregor with his own ideas, and a few of them are probably going to be, non-starters. Like, for example, hey, I'm ready to come back to the UFC. You guys ready to give me 5% of the company? It's like, no. When you're at the airport, Connor, carry the owner's bags for us. That's what they told him, basically. They said, you're not getting any of the company, and that's it.
Yeah, I think that he's just really overvalued his worth. And I think the UFC...
And he's letting years tick away.
Yeah, and he's making so much money off his whiskey. He made so much money off the Mayweather fight. He's not hurting by any means. He could go do basically anything that he wants to. He could act. He could go to WWE. He could do all sorts of different things. He's got things in the future. He's involved in a lot of different business ventures. But he's also having issues in his own personal life that I think is clouding some of his issues. But apparently he's been in the gym. But I think the UFC with the whole ESPN deal and, just going forward, new stars emerging, I think they've come to the conclusion that they don't need Conor McGregor. There was people that were genuinely thought back in around the 2016, 2017 time that Conor McGregor was becoming bigger than the UFC. If he would have won the Mayweather fight somehow, if the stars would have aligned and some kind of dramatic, just out of this world upset would have happened, then maybe we would have been talking about maybe the biggest athlete the world's ever seen if he'd have won that fight. I mean, he would have been gigantic, but he didn't win that fight, and then he didn't win the Khabib fight, and I think Conor McGregor's best days could still be ahead of him if he got motivated to fight and came back and made a good comeback, got back to the title, all this. But at this moment, I think the UFC's just come to the conclusion that, that we did start throwing a lot of our stock into Conor McGregor. We did start making Conor McGregor the face of the company, and almost as if he was bigger than the company itself. But now fans have realized it. The company's realized it, that was never the case. That Conor McGregor is just a fighter that works for the UFC. The UFC is going to go on and is going to have its best days are going to be in the future, and Conor McGregor is going to be a memory. And I think the UFC's realized that now, and they're going to stop catering to Conor on everything that he wants. And I think that trend will continue. I think Conor McGregor needs to fight. And if Conor McGregor wants that kind of pullback where he's asking for shares of the company and stuff, then he needs to go back on pre-Mayweather Conor McGregor and go on a big run and prove his elite nature of selling pay-per-views and winning fights. But until that happens, Conor McGregor's demands are just falling on deaf ears now.
Yep, and then even more and more deaf ears with the UFC, it appears, and they're locking up a lot of the talent in that weight class, and it does seem to be narrowing down to be Conor and Gaethje. I think that's an exciting fight. It should be a winnable fight for McGregor, and that Gaethje is, Gaethje to me is a lot like Eddie Alvarez in that he counts on instinct to fight, and sometimes with, a good technique or whatever, you're able to impose your will, and Conor is very precise. So, and Gaethje is very hittable. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I'm excited about that.
For the record, I think that'd be a good fight for Conor McGregor. I think that I think Conor McGregor wins that fight, and I'm a big Justin Gaethje fan. But Justin Gaethje, his chin can only take so much, just when I look at that fight with Dustin Poirier was countering a lot with that lead left straight, throwing that left hand fast, long, and wide, and was just sticking Justin Gaethje. And that's eventually by the fourth round is what ended up. He threw an inside leg kick from southpaw from right hand, while Poirier was southpaw, and he countered with a nice left hand. Conor's got even a straighter left hand, even more precise with more power. I don't think that's a bad fight for Conor McGregor to come back on. I think Justin Gaethje's got a solid name in the company. I think a lot of people like him. I think that would be something that could co-headline a pay-per-view, and I think that's a pretty safe fight for Conor McGregor, in my opinion. I think there's people that would disagree with me, but I think his counterpunching's just too good. I think if Conor McGregor is still the same Conor McGregor as he was before in terms of skill, which I have no reason to think otherwise, I think he beats Justin Gaethje.
And we can go ahead and wrap it up. That's our preview of the UFC's ESPN Plus 10 card at May 18th. And out of Rochester, New York, the main event, RDA and Kevin Lee. Anything else on that undercard, on that mid-card or anything like that? The main card there? We skipped through the fights, but we didn't really talk about it. The bottom line is we'll do the wagerings later in the week, or is there something special on there?
No, I think we kind of briefed it over. I mean, unless you wanted to go through the wage range now.
No, let's do that one later, a little bit later in the week. Let's do it tomorrow if we can.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And so yep, after that we started previewing obviously with the McGregor, and we got Anthony Pettis coming back to take on Nate Diaz. That's an exciting fight. So we have covered the UFC here at the Cage Rage Podcast number 86. I'm Miguel Iturrate. That's Devin Miller. And please like and subscribe. Check our back material. We've been doing this for a little bit, and a lot of material out there, and we'll continue to do so. Enjoy. Any last words, Dev?
Nope, that's it. Subscribe, like, and share.
All righty. Thank you very much, folks. Check it out.